Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar. We're just going to be getting started in about a minute or two, so but hang on the line and we'll get started just shortly. Okay, it's about 1 minute past the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Let me just put my camera on and invite Avishay to do the same. And welcome to this webinar. This is a webinar called Mastering Application Security at a Security Company. So we're looking forward to hearing about a number of tips and tricks from our friends at CyberArk's. So just a couple of housekeeping rules. We have a questions tab and also a chat tab. So feel free to ping some questions in the Q&A and add some discussion in the chat, and we'll take a look at them. We'll also be following up this webinar with an email to everyone who is registered with a recording of this webinar, as well as the reports which we're going to be referencing in this webinar from ESG. So take a look out for that straight after this webinar. Let me quickly just make some introductions to the folks on the call. So obviously I'm speaking. My name's Simon Maple. I'm the VP of Developer Relations here at Snyk. I've been at Snyk for a couple of years now, and one of the big things that we want to do at Snyk is really help secure developer workflows while keeping the pace of fast development in a modern environment. So we have a number of products which I'm sure we'll send you some more information about as well, but very namely around the SCA space, the container space, and infrastructure as code as well. So visit snyk.io or snyk.io, however you prefer to say it, .io, and go and take a look at some of the other things that we have there. Love to welcome my friend Avishay from CyberArk. Welcome, Avishay. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Thank you for having me, Simon.
Oh, it's absolutely our pleasure. So welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit, you're a security architect at CyberArk. Why don't you tell us a little bit about CyberArk and also what your role entails as a security architect?
Sure. So CyberArk is the global leader in the privilege access management and identity security. And my role over there is actually to lead the security strategy of one of the development groups in CyberArk R&D.
Awesome. Well, it's our absolute pleasure to have you here. And as part of what we're going to be talking about here today is, if I go to the next slide, sorry, part of what we're going to be talking about today is, first of all, this term shift left, just talking very, very briefly about what shift left means, but we're not going to go too deep into that, as of course, I'm sure most people have heard this term overused by lots of management and others as well. But we're going to take have a little discussion about what shifting left means to you, Avishay, and also CyberArk as well. Then the rest of this discussion is going to be based around the ESG 2020 Modern Application Development Security Report, which, as I mentioned at the start of this call, we'll make sure gets sent to you after this. We're going to take a number of questions from this report, do some polls with the audience, and see how this audience fares, as well as the results from the survey taking place on that report. We'll take a look at some of these top developer security challenges, and then again, to finish off, how CyberArk develops a dev-first security approach. So looking forward to having lots of discussion and lots of tips. Okay, so first of all, this term shift left, I'm going to just briefly kind of like walk people through what this means to us, and then invite Avishay to talk about how the CyberArk group has adopted a shift left environment. So one of the big things about DevOps is that security teams have become quite overwhelmed with the amount of work that they have on day by day, week on week. And this is largely because the DevOps mentality is about having developers develop fast, push to production quickly and often in a way that is very stable, very predictable, but it allows them to provide value in a fast and responsive way to that market. And as a result of these changes, these business changes that we've needed to adopt, there are a number of changes that we've needed to put into our process, into our culture to make this work. And the speed at which code and builds go through our pipeline puts a number of stress on security teams, as an example, because the number of developers that we have versus the number of security, even ops folks, but the number of security people means that if we want to push regularly and these 100 developers are pushing constantly into a production environment, where does that leave the security team? Can that security team scale, or does that scale through more the development? So when we think about how, if we was to look at just that security individual, a few security people working with the development team to stop vulnerabilities going into the development to the production environment, what is often seen if you don't see too much of a DevSecOps or DevOps approach is security teams putting in gates potentially between builds or at various stages of that DevOps pipeline. And this is something which frustrates, it slows down the developer's ability to deliver fast. So one of the things that this has brought rise to is this notion of DevSecOps and shifting left. And what shifting left really means is it pushes more, it doesn't push, it shares the responsibility of security between the security team and the developers. One of the other things it does is it allows developers to almost like shift a little bit right as well. There's a couple of ways of looking at this. But one of the key things is, whatever we call this, the key thing we want to look at is how we empower developers and how we enable security teams to support developers. We can't just say we're going to push security left. That means security just keep pushing reports back to dev and dev have to deal with it. We need to learn how to empower developers, whether it be tools, whether it be culture, whether it be discussions with security teams or education, to own that security and scale that security through the development team. So I'd like to, at this stage, invite Avishay to talk about what shift left means at CyberArk and how the CyberArk team have dealt with changes in the organization to adopt this shift left approach.
So thank you, Simon. I would like to start with a small introduction before we dive into the content, just to get some context for the listeners. So 1 year ago, the development group I'm part of started to develop a new product from scratch. Initially, we planned to do it on top of containers, but then we pivoted for some reasons to serverless because we evaluated both options and decided to be vendor locked to a specific cloud vendor. Over the time, there are more and more groups at CyberArk, development groups, that adopt DevOps principles. And as part of the trend that we're trying to keep up with the DevOps metrics like deployment frequency, time, availability, etc., we found that adopting shift left principles mainly as part of our SDLC is something that goes hand in hand with those metrics and helps us both from a security and DevOps perspective. So the first of all, and maybe the most important thing that we decided from day zero since we started, is that developers and architects are responsible for the security of the features from the design stage through development and production. That enables us to shift the responsibility from the security architects left to the developers and system architects and allow them, those personas, to raise security concerns during the different stages of the secure development lifecycle. In order to do that, we had to come up with a methodology that will bring security down to earth. And I think you can skip the rest of the bullets because we're going to deep dive into them later on today. Mm-hmm. So security standards are being handled as part of the SDLC. Tools and software that we're using in the IDN pipeline and the fact that developers are taking active part in designing and developing security tools, and of course, security education, which is essential.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we'll go into these, as you mentioned, in a little bit more depth. And we're going to take some of these questions and we're going to ask the exact same questions from the Modern Application Development Security Report, which, as we mentioned, was developed by ESG, the Enterprise Strategy Group. And some of the goals that the Enterprise Strategy Group had as part of this report was to, first of all, examine the buying intentions of AppSec teams, particularly around the dev time application security, to understand the trigger points that influences the application, the AppSec investments. Also to determine to which extent the security teams understands the modern application sec processes and practices, and then finally to understand the dynamic between the teams. Obviously, with something like DevOps, it's really changed. It's really had a culture change between developers and operations. So to understand whether the dynamics have changed with DevSecOps between security and developer teams as well. So let's jump into our first question, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to push this poll out to everyone in this. There we go. I'm launching this poll, so hopefully you'll see a poll. So please do click either yes or no on this. The question here is: do the developers at your organization have the knowledge needed to mitigate identified security issues? So do you feel your developers in your teams, or you, if you're a developer yourself, have the education, have the knowledge to be able to fix security issues? So I'll leave that one a little bit. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. This is really interesting in terms of the numbers so far. Okay, really interesting. Okay, so this is surprising. Do the developers at your
Oh my
organization
God.
have the knowledge needed to mitigate identified security issues? 100% no, right? That's very, very surprising. Okay, let's take a look at what the report states. The report states that 29%, so just under a third of developers lack the knowledge to mitigate risk. Avishay, does this surprise you that developers are struggling to mitigate issues?
No, at all, but I can share how we are trying to handle this in our organization.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and I'm kind of like, I guess one of the areas that I'm most interested, going back to the reasons as to why the report was put together, was how do you balance that knowledge between developers and security? So what does that relationship look like, and then how do the developers gain that knowledge in the team?
So from what I can share, in my organization, we have a central security team in our R&D department. That security team consists of high-profile security architects that acts as an umbrella, a security umbrella, and establish centralized policies and procedures. But not only, they also provide development teams and security architects with advice as needed, consultancy, threat modeling, design reviews, code reviews, incident management. We get all the help we need from the central security team. And on every development group on R&D, we have what we call security champions. Those personas are essentially developers, and they are going through security training, formal security training. In the training, they learn stuff like how to do severity assessments, threat modeling. But I think the most important thing that they learn to do is to be aware of security issues. And they are doing all that in addition to their day-to-day responsibilities, which is quite impressive.
Mm-hmm. And who gives that formal training? Is that a third-party thing that you pull in, or is it the central security team that train your developers?
It's a mix between external consultant, security professionals, of course, that we get their advice, and also security personas from inside the organization, which have the vast experience to pass their knowledge to the security champions.
Okay. Okay. And do you expect the security champions to train the other developers in that in the development teams, the development squads, or is that developer more the go-to? Sorry, is that security champion the go-to person for the developer team to ask questions of? How does that interaction work?
So what we're trying to do is to find the developers that are more oriented for security, and we don't expect them to educate all the rest of the team. If they want to do it, they are more than welcome to. But we're more expecting of them to be aware of security issues and be like, an ambassadors of the security in the development teams. So most of the answers the developers will ask, they will have the answers.
Okay. So when you have individuals that are in the development team that are more kind of like these security champions, security mavens, and a central security team, who then takes responsibility for security, AppSec overall?
Yep. So I can share that in my group, we decided from day zero before we started even recruiting for the group, we decided that security is everyone's responsibility, like the previous slide mentioned. That means the security architects are acting more like advisors and consultants, but the developers are responsible and accountable for handling security issues. That approach enables us as a security architects to get inputs from developers during the development lifecycle, and security issues are raised even before writing a single line of code. During the design phase or the planning phase, it also enables us better visibility and a way to decide on which areas we should focus when we are allocating our time for security ceremonies.
And does the central security team ever get involved in those design discussions, or are they more of a like open hours kind of group
Yeah,
that you can refer
open
to?
hours kind of.
Open
Right.
hours. Okay. Cool. Very interesting. And how about your security processes? How is that modeled within your org or your software development lifecycle?
So one way we chose to do it is to integrate security standards like ASVS, for example, by OWASP, into our SDLC, and we did it in a way that developers are aware of those security standards. They understand security requirements. Usually we do it on a weekly or bi-weekly basis meetings with those security champions, and they understand the logic behind the security requirements. Therefore, they find it easier to mitigate security issues as soon as they are raised, and obviously raise security issues. And even a lot of time when those issues are actually mitigated by the developers at the same time they are being raised. So we don't have almost nothing in terms of cost to fix, and we are achieving those quick wins during early SDLC phases, like I said, design or planning of feature.
Got it. Okay, cool. Let's jump over to the second poll question now. So this is one question that this is a very, very interesting one, because what we were talking about with shift left is at one point was about not adding these blockers into the software development lifecycle. So how do you have this pipeline that whereby you don't have these long pauses, you don't have these kind of like stop the world, we have to do this testing or do this analysis, and nothing is automated. So the question here is, do the developers at your organization have security tools that keep pace with development cycles, or does it actually slow you down? So I'm going to push this question out to attendees. I'm not sure if this is actually being sent out to all attendees. I really hope so. So feel free to click yes and no. Let me know in the chat if you can't if you can't see that, because I'm wondering if perhaps it only went to a small proportion of our audience last time, do the developers at your organization have security tools that keep pace with development life cycles? How big a problem is this for you, Avishay?
Yes, so I think it's a problem, but since we're kind of, new development group and we started only almost a year ago, so we built some processes and procedures, and we chose our tools in a way that doesn't, slow down developers and development cycles. And I can elaborate a little bit more later.
Absolutely. So let me come back to our poll. So we're getting some good numbers. We're getting some good numbers sharing, responding, but again, very, very heavily on the no side. So developers at people's organizations do not have security tools that keep pace with development cycles. Now, let me quickly share the next slide, which goes on to again a very, very similar number. So only a quarter here have tools that. Use tools that slow down development lifecycle. Sorry, so rather the other way around. So existing tools hinder development. I think actually, let me just see. Let's slow down. Okay, I think that maybe should be the other way around. But yeah, existing tools hinder development. So talk to me a little bit more about that in terms of how you've needed to change the way you select tools, perhaps to keep the speed of your pipelines being able to deliver fast.
Yeah, so I can share that since we're trying to adopt the shift left principle, and we're trying to get developers, feedback on potential issues as soon as possible. I saw that a lot of time or in organizations, they're working, for example, on a separate network for development, usually closed network without internet access, because they want to mitigate risks like code leakage, etc. Therefore, most of the times it causes an accessibility issue, since most of the traditional tools don't adopt themselves to the DevOps pipeline, and they're not DevOps friendly. So you can't fit them into your pipeline. A lot of time you can find yourself, for example, zipping an archive with your code and then accessing another server to process the zip and process the code and output the report. I think that kind of issues is what hinders development teams. When we started, we tried to pick security testing tools that are pipeline friendly. But for organizations that are, being tied in with a license for 3 or 5 or even more years, you have to be creative, and you have to try and find a way with the IT department and security professionals over there to let you have comfortable access to those security tools, so you can maximize the value by using those tools and have them accessible for developers and pipelines, obviously.
And I think this is very similar to the DevOps movement as an example, whereby, when pipelines for the very first time sped up so quickly, it was a case of, we can't just try and retrofit our existing tools into a pipeline and expect it to go fast. We need to look at which tools have been specifically designed to be fast and fit into this pipeline. There's no other way of really trying to do that and feel that success. Were there any kind of like tools in specifically or in general? What types of tools really were causing the slowdown?
So I would not mention any names
No,
of
not
tools,
names,
but
more the types of tools. Yeah.
yeah. So I think like not so modern tools, tools that more like legacy tools. But I think it's more important, rather than just focus on pipeline integration. It's also look on the quality of the results and the reports. Let's not forget that. Make sure that there is like a serious company behind those tools, and someone that is, actively updating any databases or security rules or vulnerability databases out there. So we won't left behind. I can speak a little bit more, the slide deck. On the next slides, I have a little bit more information regarding this.
Sure. Okay, let's jump over to that next slide, because I think this kind of like next question is related as well, which is about, are the developers at your organization using the tools you've invested in efficiently? And I think, let me launch this poll here. I think this is I expect we're gonna, well, I don't want to bias the poll here, but based on previous questions, I wonder if we're going to see a similar thing. So yeah, are the developers at your organization using the tools you've invested in efficiently? And Avishay, this is very, very much a culture thing as well as the tools, right? In terms of getting that developer adoption, is this something you feel is easy to do? And I guess it's not just about using them, but having that knowledge about how to use it effectively. What's your view of the hardest thing to the hardest barrier to actually achieve this?
So I think that most of the times the security tools are, like we said, they are transparent to developers. And I saw that most of the times the security professional did all the scans, and he needed to have some knowledge at the tool, obviously. But this knowledge is not available for the developers. So I think that one way to mitigate this is to work with the vendor and have sessions that explains developers about the tools. Like we said earlier, bring the security down to earth to developers, teach them how to use the tools, teach them how to use them efficiently. And I think that's one of the things that I can share that we at CyberArk did over the last year with our current security testing tools. And we saw amazing results in both in the adoption and also in the efficiency and quality of results.
So let me share the results here. So around a third of people are saying that they do use their tools efficiently, and around 2/3 say they don't. And this is very, very interesting to then jump ahead to see that it's kind of like similar in terms of the numbers here. We're seeing 24% of developers are not utilizing their current testing tools. So yeah, poor adoption of existing tools, but also poorly seeing that from the efficiency point of view. So in terms of what is a good tool, how do you select what is the right tool for your teams?
I think that there are few quality criterias, and it also depends on the development group. And if we're talking about end-to-end developers or role-based developers, so I think like we said, the first quality criteria is obviously the quality of the results and the reports. I think also that alerting and the alert pipeline, that alert goes since it's coming from the security tool until it reaches the developer or the security professional, is also crucial because it enables you to mitigate risks, obviously, as soon as they are found. And continuously monitoring your code and alerting for issues is also very important, because you can have an issue in your production code, issue like a 0-day or similar issues that you didn't know about when you push the code at the beginning, but when it's on your production code, you'll get a notification, and then you can start working by the incident response playbook. So that's also very important. And remediation steps. I think that to have clear remediation steps over a vulnerability or a potential issue is also very important. When you go over the incident response playbook, you need to, you don't need to think, you need to act like a robot. and it's important to have the mitigation suggestions ready in front of you. I think also that that the DevOps friendly thing is coming after that. Features like Git integration, CI/CD tools and plugins, and command line interfaces. Obviously, I can tell that under the same conditions and quality, we would prefer to work with pipeline friendly and developer friendly tools as part of our shift left strategy. I think that one last thing worth mentioning is the license flexibility. Since we live in a dynamic world, a dynamic license is something that will allow us to minimize risks. Obviously, risks that include cost estimation when going over the security budget.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot of what you mentioned there is kind of like, does the tool do the job? It's very functional, right? Does it provide me with these notifications? Does it? Can we use it in a CLI interface? Can we use it as part of the pipeline, etc.? But you also talked a little bit there about developer, kind of like developer experience or developers using it. So from that point of view, and given that this is like very focused on adoption, how important is developer experience of the tool to that adoption, and what does developer experience mean to you? The usability of a tool, what does that mean to you from a security point of view?
So I think we can divide the answer to two. So there is the world where the developer lives, which is I can testify on my case, which is the IDE and the CLI. From what I'm seeing. So investing in those environments will make a security tool developer friendly. Also in our situation, we have a group of end-to-end developers. So I think that build reports and clear error reporting, if there is an issue with the code or even with the tool, is also very important to allow the developer to fix issues quickly, both pipeline-wise, if there is an error with the build slaves or whatsoever. And I think also a very clear UI is also very important to present all those issues, to present the security status of every project, and make all this information accessible for developers. This is also something that I find very important.
Excellent. And this kind of like actually leads on to the next question. But before we get to the last question, CyberArk is actually a Snyk customer as well, as of course our good friends. So in terms of let's see how this question goes. Maybe I'll regret this. Maybe I won't. How did Snyk fare with the kind of like I guess both the features as well as the developer experience in your POC? What was what did we do well at? What could we have done better at? What were the results?
So overall, I think it was pretty good. And to be honest, if it wasn't, I wouldn't have found myself speaking, on this stage right now. But I think that Snyk did a great job on the criteria that we found important. I think also to have someone, a solution engineer that helps you set up everything correctly. Also to have a customer success person that escorts you through the through the success criteria of the product. Define the success criteria. What is a success criteria for you as a development group? What are your goals? What are your KPIs? This is also something that I think is very important, a part of the technical aspects and the functional aspects. And I think that Snyk is doing a very good job in there. And also to have features that, feature requests, to handle feature requests from customers, and the ability to deliver them in a manner that won't hurt the customer's success criterias is also something that I find to be very important for a customer to be satisfied and succeed, and also improve its security posture.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And in terms of one of the things that you mentioned there was a little bit earlier was in and around integrations. And if I jump over to the next slide, our final question is about integrations. Really, it's let me launch this poll. Yeah, it's around integrations, and it's around how tools integrate with development and DevOps tools. So of course you'll get varying types of tools. Some will be a complete third-party tool which will run. You go to it to find your answers and to potentially remediate or do whatever you want to do with that kind of tool. So this is a question out to the audience then. Does your current security tools integrate with your development and DevOps tools? So yeah, you mentioned this is important to you, Avishay. Why do you feel to developers in general? Is it more of a distraction thing? What do you think is the reason why people care about the integrations in CI/CD?
So let me pivot this question a little bit, because I want to shift even more left. The way we use our tools is we're using them in a way that we're trying to find a way to build procedures and processes around them. So instead of just running them in our pipeline, we're also preparing procedures like a license handling. So actually, the tools is a part of the steps that you need to walk through if you are encountering a license issue. And I think one of the main roles of a good tool is to be a good answer and source of truth when you are going through a security issue. So the tool need to make your life as a developer easier. And then I think the next thing in priority is to have them running on your pipeline, but to build processes and procedures. For example, we can say in one procedure, go to the UI or CLI of Snyk or another vendor, and then the developers have more clear view of what they need to do, and hopefully the UI or the CLI present the information in a friendly way. So I think that helps.
Awesome. And so let me just quickly share the results. So yeah, it's about half and half. So some do, some don't integrate with their development and DevOps tools. Let's jump into the next slide. This is 23% of developers lack tools that integrate into the SDLC. So some majority do have tools that integrate in, but still that's a large proportion of people who don't. In terms of what you feel would suffer if things weren't integrated into the SDLC, is it adoption? Is it more frustration of the developers when they have to go to multiple places, or is it actually quality? Do people if something is hard to get, do they try and work around it or avoid it? What do you feel like are the biggest pain points if things aren't integrated?
So I think that because we live in a DevOps world, and obviously developers are pushing code to Git repositories at a rapid pace, might even push to production, I don't know, 10 or 15 times a day. It would be almost impossible for us to shift left and enforce security without proper both pipeline and SDLC integrations. The way that we handle this the situation with some tools that were not pipeline friendly is usually investing some effort, to maximize the value from those tools. Work with the vendor, like I said before, write scripts and wrappers to get the best experience out of the tools. But to the point, I think that it is crucial to integrate the tools and into both pipeline and SDLC, to increase your security posture.
Excellent. Okay, so I actually got one question come through, which is, or sorry, there's a number of comments coming through as questions, which are actually saying that some people are answering yes to the screens and no is showing at 100%. So I think maybe not all of the results actually came through on the polls, but hopefully it was somewhat representative of those who did answer. So sorry about that if your responses weren't captured. Awesome. Let me go to the next screen where we kind of like go through some of the key takeaways, and these are some of the key takeaways which have come from the report, and I think this is important to mention here. So, first of all, this is a really interesting one, Avishay. Most people think their application security programs are solid, though many still push vulnerable code. Why do you think people are pushing vulnerable code? Is it do people know better than the tools? Do you think it may be a reachability issue, or is there thresholds which people are allowed to push vulnerable code through? Why do you think this might be the case?
I think that the most popular case would be lack of security gates, but also lack of IDE plugins or CLI interfaces that will allow the developers to find issues quicker. And I think maybe a small portion of the issues is that developers are finding those issues only after they push the code to production, or issues like 0 days. So yeah, I think that would be it.
Awesome. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Next key takeaway: multiple security tools are needed to secure the porosity of application development and deployment models in use today. And I think this is one thing which is there are a lot of security companies around these days, all providing various tools. Many of them providing tools, the right tool for the right job. So you get lots of different tools in and around SCA and SAST and container security testing and things like that. So a lot of people adopting multiple security tools. And the next point is very interesting on this as well, which is the proliferation of AppSec security testing tools. So AppSec testing tools is an issue for many. So people aren't necessarily comfortable with the amount of vendors or the amount of tools they have, with more than a third focusing on investments of consolidation. So very, very interesting. And this is one thing, actually, this is a very interesting thing which we're seeing, because at Snyk we're pulling together a platform, a cloud native application security group of products, which which each tests different parts of deployments, whether it be an AppSec, whether it be a container sec, whether it be an infrastructure as code, which is very, very interesting to see that. So I think it also shows where the market is in terms of when people are trying to like buy lots of things and then realize how much they've got and then try and consolidate that down. So very, very interesting. Yeah, we mentioned this one earlier as well, Avishay, about developer security training is spotty. So I think that's I've heard a lot of companies actually do very, very similar to what you suggested around the security champions. And to be honest, I haven't heard of a group that has done something like that has seen that not work, or has regretted that decision to push more education into developers. So I think that's definitely a good best practice that we're seeing. And finally, this is really good, certainly from our point of view as a security team, as a security vendor, but organizations are investing with more than a half, planning to significantly increase budgets over this year over the prior year. So I think this is obviously getting a more and more important area that developers, particularly with the faster deployments, need to stay on top of. So it's good to see that businesses and companies and organizations are providing groups with that budget to be able to actually achieve that, rather than just ask for things but not support. So do any of these, which of these, I don't want to go into too much in terms of budgets and stuff like that, but which of these ring most relevant to what you're seeing at CyberArk today?
So I would like to relate to the last point. I think that in the current market situation, it's very hard to recruit a good security staff, And I think that in order to minimize the risk, you have to find the correct, like you said, the right tool for the right job, and invest in it also to minimize the risk and cover the areas that your security staff is maybe feeling less comfortable with. So I think that's a good practice, and we definitely seeing it here at CyberArk how hard is to recruit good security architects and security engineers.
Yeah, and I think, if you look at something like when you're looking at a developer pool or something like that, there is just the sheer numbers of developers out there and people training to be developers. It's a far more well-trodden kind of like path that you can kind of like hire from. The pool is so much larger. In terms of points, where are we here? In terms of points 2 and 3, do you see this as something which is likely going to happen in the coming years, whereby companies are buying multiple vendors' tools, or not even vendors, just using multiple tools, and are at some point looking to potentially consolidate to more of a suite of tools across their organization?
So I think it's natural for a vendor to try and offer a product that matches the vast amount of features and helps his customers to mitigate issues in potential areas. But I think that as a security professional, you always have to open your eyes, see what's going out, overview the competition, evaluate tools all the time, and keep up with the market, because it might be easier for organizations from a billing perspective to get all the features from one tool and pay only to one vendor. But naturally, you will see vendors that are better in vulnerability handling, and you'll see vendors that are better in static code analysis. So I think it's important to evaluate tools all the time and keep your eye on, and almost never compromise on quality in terms of on your quality of your security in terms of instead of other requirements.
Cool. Even if that was a consolidation of tools, or I guess that's probably maybe something which is more a request from maybe a management team or someone at a different level. Yeah. Okay, cool. Get some questions in. Feel free to ask questions in the Q&A for those of you who have some questions. Question coming in. Okay, this is an interesting one. How do developers make time for security in their sprint? So I guess this is a different type of budgeting question. This is a really interesting one, because obviously developers have many things that they need to do sprint on sprint. What do you do in your team so that developers can dedicate enough time to?
So I think in the beginning, I have to convince my manager, which is the group manager in the R&D group I'm part of, and I had to convince him that we need to allocate this time, during the development phases, because if we won't, we will enlarge the risk, and we will pay. We will pay this time 3 or 4 times more later on. So if you are able to identify the issues earlier, you will be also be able to find them quicker. And if you have the education and the training as a developer, and you know how to cope with the best practices, and you have guidelines for secure coding, then this time that you need to allocate specifically for security is becoming very little to none, because you have all the education, you're doing it natively, and you're embracing all the needed tools and that help you to securely push features to production. So I think is that answering the question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think some of the examples that we've seen from different teams, various teams that are using Snyk is some people will have like a fixed Friday whereby, I mean, obviously there's SLAs, right? So if you have a high sev vulnerability, you have to have a certain amount of time before that's fixed, and that is becomes
Yeah,
a high sev issue that someone has on their backlog. But I think it's like the trickiest thing is two pieces. One is how do you stop vulnerabilities getting into your repo? That's not necessarily a time thing because it's you're actively developing, but the thing that takes time is to reduce that technical debt of security issues. And you see, we've talked to people who have had hundreds of issues, thousands of issues sometimes, and it's about, okay, where do we even start with that? So things like prioritization and things like that help, but how do we then find the time to do that? So yeah, some people will do like fixed Fridays where you have an entire day which is dedicated to fixing security quality. Sometimes we see I don't think I've really ever seen an entire sprint dedicated to security or anything like that. I think that would really be only done if there was like a severe security backlog or something that needed attention, and breaches were happening, hacks were happening all the time. Sometimes we see individual developers take it. It's almost like a rota where there are some developers that take it in turns to reduce a backlog on a team. So there's some other kind of like suggestions there which we've seen work pretty significantly. But yeah, I mean, I think it comes from the top down. It's all about the pressures on the development team in terms of what are they being asked of themselves, what are people asking of that development team? If it's all about forward-looking forward-looking functionality and features, everything's going to drop from quality to other things because all the pressure is just on delivery. But if you're interested in getting a high quality, high security, high performance, high availability kind of project, then you can bake that into your your estimations of how long things will take and what you can put into a sprint. So yeah, it's about having that exec support for sure.
I think that also in terms of uh, the things that you can do is invest in your infrastructure.
Mm.
And by saying infrastructure, I mean centralized controls, for example,
Mm-hmm.
develop centralized functions or wrappers that developers can, they can consume from a central repo. And then when you enforce using those functions, you'll make sure that all the business logic is going through the secured functions
Mm-hmm.
and methods.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that is something that is really worth to invest in. And also infrastructure as a code is something that really helps you to find and mitigate issues, whether it's Kubernetes or Amazon or Microsoft Cloud.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very important to do also.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot actually, and that works too. That there's two reasons why I feel like that sometimes is really important, and one particularly with like the really large organizations where there's a lot of code duplication and like everyone needs a log on, right? So okay, does everyone have to rewrite that, and does everyone have to rewrite the same buggy logic or use the same buggy libraries? If everyone is trying to do similar things, why don't we do this once, get some really strong security support on in terms of making sure there's this almost like a template, right? And then the rest of the company use that template. Then it's easy to use, easy to be secure, and actually quicker for developers as well.
Yeah,
Avishay,
I agree.
it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you. We've done some questions, but you're more than welcome to download the full ESG report there. You can either spend the next 5 minutes looking at that and typing each character one by one in a browser, or you can wait for the email and then click on the link that we're going to send you. We'll send you a recording of this as well as this link, so feel free to go ahead and download it there. And there's a whole bunch of really interesting content about all of these stats and much more as well. So Avishay and CyberArk, it's been a pleasure hosting you on this webinar. Thank you very much, and see you all again very soon.
Thank you very much, Simon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.